Pilgrims on their way to Canterbury. Okay, I think that catches us up. Back to rhyme in your English. Befell that, in that season, on a day in Southwark, at the tavern, as I lay ready to start upon my pilgrimage to Canterbury, full of devout homage, there came at nightfall to that hostelry some 29 in a company of sundry persons who had chanced to fall in fellowship, and pilgrims were they all, that toward Canterbury town would ride. The rooms and stables spacious were and wide, and well we there were eased, and of the best. And briefly, when the sun had gone to rest, we made agreement that we'd early rise, to take the road, and view I will apprise.
But nonetheless, whilst we have time to face, before yet farther this tale we pace, it seems to me accorded with reason to inform you of the state of everyone, and who they were arrayed there in the end, and with the night will we thus first begin.
There with us was a knight, a worthy man, who from the very first time he began to ride about, loved honor and chivalry, the spirit of giving, truth, and courtesy. He was a valiant warrior for his lord. No man had ridden farther with the sword, through Christendom and through the land of heathen creeds, and always he was praised for his worthy deeds.
There with him was his son, the youthful squire, a lover and a bachelor to admire. His locks were curled as if set by a press. His age was 20 years or so, I guess. In stature, he was of an average height, and blessed with great agility and might. He was embroidered like a flower bed, or meadow full of flowers, white and red. He sang, or else he fluted all the day. He is as fresh as is the month of May.
Now he had brought one servant by his side, a yeoman with no more he chose to ride. This yeoman wore a coat, a hood of green. He had a sheaf of arrows, bright and keen. Beneath his belt, positioned handily, he tended to his gear most yeomanly. His arrow feathers never drooped too low, and in his hand he bore a mighty bow. His head was closely cropped, his face was brown. This fellow knew his woodcraft up and down.
There also was a nun, a prioress, called Madame Eglantine. This nun excelled at singing when church services were held, intoning through her nose melodiously. Of table manners she learnt it all, for from her lip she let no morsel fall. Her charity was so great that to see a mouse caught in a trap was enough to make her cry if dead or bleeding. She also had some little dogs that she was feeding, with roasted meat or milk and fine white bread, and sorely she would weep if one were dead. Or if someone were to smite it with a stick. She was all tender heart, right to the quick.
A merchant with a forked beard also came, dressed in a motley. A Flemish beaver hat he wore, and boots most elegantly wrought. He spoke with pomp on everything he thought, and boasted of the earnings he'd collected. He felt the trader had to be protected. He used his wit so well, with such finesse, that no one guessed the man's in-depthness. He was a worthy fellow all the same. To tell the truth, I do not know his name.
There also was an Oxford student, one whose logic studies long since had begun. He looked quite hollow, far from debonair, and threadbare was the cloak he had to wear. He'd rather have at his bed's head some 20 books, all bound in black or red, of Aristotle and his philosophy, for study was the foremost thing he heeded. He never spoke one word more than was needed, and then he spoke with formal reverence. He'd make it short but make a lot of sense. Of highest moral virtue was his speech, and gladly he would learn and gladly teach.
They brought brought along a cook with them to fix their meals. He boiled their chicken in a mix of marrow bones, tart herbs, and gallagale. He knew right off the drop of London ale. You had to boil, roast, broil, and fry. Whip up a stew as well as bake a pie. It seemed a shame and caused me some chagrin to see he had an ulcer on his shin. He made blank mange that I rank with the best.
There was a skipper hailing from the west, as far away as Dartmouth I'd allow. He rode a nag as best as he knew how. A woolen gown down to his knees he wore, and round his neck and neath his arm he bore a strap from which his dagger dangled down. The summer sun had turned his color brown. He surely was a festive sort of fellow. Many a pilfered wine dropped made him mellow. While sailing from Bordeaux, the merchant storing, he had no use for conscience, thought it boring. In battle, when he gained the upper hand, by plank he'd send them home to every land.
A summer was living in the place, like a cherub he had a fire red face. With black and scabby brows and scanty beard, he had a face that old children feared. There's no ointment who cleans his face of even one white pimple. He loved his garlic. Among the whelps that sat upon his cheeks, he loved his garlic, onions, and his leeks. When he liked his wine wine red and strong as blood. And when he had come, will infuse some Latin words will he used.
Where's your preserves?
There also was a magnificent physician, none like him in the world, no competition. To speak of medicine and surgery, he was well grounded in astrology. I knew the cause of every malady, whether from hot, cold, wet, or dry and deep. And though he true what the symptoms were, he truly was a fine practitioner. And once he knew the malady's root cause, he gave cure without further pause.
From the town of Bath, a good wife came. She was a little deaf, which was a shame. She was in clothing so excellent, her works surpassed all yerks and yens. When parish wives the gifts would forward bring, none deaf seemed her of the offering, for if they did, her wrath would surely be. So mighty she was all her charity. She'd been a worthy woman all her life. At the church door with 5 men, she'd been a wife. She traveled to Jerusalem 3 times, across strange rivers and foreign climes. She wore spurs that were sharp, and in fellowship she did go laugh and talk. Ha 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 ha!
There was a good man of religion to a parson of a certain town who was poor but rich in holy thought and work. He also was a learned man, a clerk. The Christian gospel he would truly teach. Devoutly his persons to teach, to draw folks heavenward to life forever. By good explaining example was his good, great endeavor, which Christ and his apostles had to tell. He taught and he would follow it as well.
With him, his brother came, a plowman, who had carted many a load of dung. A true and well-intentioned laborer was he, who lived in peace and perfect charity. The Lord is God with a heart he loved best, when times were good as well as when distressed. He loved his neighbor as himself, for which he'd gladly thresh, or dig to make a ditch, for love of Christ, to help the poor in plight, without a wage, if it lay in his might.
The miller was as stout as any known, a fellow big in brawn as well as bone. Short-shouldered, broad he was, a husky neck, no door could keep its hinges. Once he gave a heave, or ran and broke it with his head. His beard as any sour fox was red, and as any spade it was. At that he had a wart upon his nose, right at the tip, which Huge tufts of hairs were spread like bristles on Sal's ears. Just as Reggie played the fiddle, he went up and down and played as he brought us out of town.
As briefly as we could, we've told you now degree, array, and number, and how that company of pilgrims came to be in Southwark at that pleasant hostelry. A few we failed to mention, it is true. The Franklins and haberdashers we drew, Monk, Partner, Reeve, Maxwell as well, Sergeant, Priest, none. We felt we had to fail, so other skits we could perchance tell.
Go on to Canterbury, may God speed the blissful martyr, blessed who for the deed